as far as these in-class writings that you're doing are concerned, let me just sort of briefly explain why I want you to take these seriously. Essentially, what you're doing here, right, is identifying some pattern or some theme in the story. You're choosing a quote that encapsulates that, and then you're doing a short analysis. So this is in miniature what you're going to be doing in the longer papers for the course, particularly the first two papers. Right? You're essentially going to be taking, a pattern like the kinds that you're identifying in these in-class writings and extending it out. Right? It's actually making me see the whole pattern rather than just giving me an example of it. So that's one of the reasons why I want you to come to class prepared to do this, and why I want you to take it seriously when you're here. It's not just busy work to prove that you did the reading. This is good practice for doing the papers. And, if you have a couple of these that have actually gone pretty well, you might actually draw ideas for the papers from them. So this is directly related to the bigger paper assignments. I also do want to say quickly, I know it says on the syllabus to do assignment 4 for tonight at the end of chapter 3. I'm actually going to cancel that assignment. You don't have to do that. And let me explain why. Ooh, hair in my mouth. That's fine. What I wanted you to do was use the library resources to get to the Oxford English Dictionary. Right. Does anybody know what is unusual about the Oxford English Dictionary compared to other dictionaries? What it gives you that other dictionaries do not? I will take your silence to mean no.
The history of the word.
Exactly, yes. In addition to giving you the definition, the current definition of the word, it gives you the full etymology of the word, right? What language it's originally derived from, when it first appeared in English, what it originally meant when it first appeared in English. And what I wanted you to do was take some of those words that are listed in the assignments and compare the historical definition you would find in the OED to the present definition, and reflect on how the use of the word has changed. Unfortunately, as it turns out, our library no longer subscribes to the Oxford English Dictionary. So I can't have you do that assignment. So, not so good for your intellectual development, probably better for your free time, right? So don't worry about doing assignment 4. So I just want to pick up quickly from where we left off last time, right? We were talking about those two videos. We had the Coolio Gangsta's Paradise video and the Weird Al Amish Paradise video we were trying to look at side by side. And does anybody remember off the top of their heads what the structure of each video was? How they were structured similarly? What was each based, or what was the sort of the central action in each one?
They were both trying to show the audience how they live.
Yeah, in some sense, it's an insider in a particular subculture explaining what life is like in that subculture, right? And who are they talking to? Are they talking directly to the audience in either video? Who is Coolio talking to?
Outside of the teacher.
Yes. Yes, talking to a white female school teacher. So Coolio was talking to someone who was clearly an outsider from the lifestyle that he's talking about, right? Somebody who clearly has no direct connection to it. And explaining to her, right, someone who wouldn't understand what life is like where he's from. Now, what about in the Weird Al video?
He was talking to another Amish girl.
Yeah, the person he's talking to is also a white woman, right, but is wearing an Amish costume. So he's talking to another insider, right? Now, I ask you to reflect on this a little bit and think about the difference we see in this similarity, right? Similarly structured thing. In both cases, right, it's a man who's deeply immersed in some subculture talking to a woman. But in the first case, he's talking to an outsider, and in the second case, he's talking to another insider. If you're trying to explain yourself to an outsider, what does that suggest about your relationship to people outside of the subculture you're in?
That you're different.
Yeah, that you're different from them, right? You recognize your difference from them. And what do you want from them?
You want them to understand it.
Yeah.
Explaining it to them because they don't understand it well.
Yeah. You want them to get it, right? He's trying to explain himself to her because he wants her to get it. He wants her to understand, right, how he's been shaped, what social forces have influenced him, right? What his daily life is like. So yeah, so this comes out of a desire to be understood. By outsiders. You want them to know where you're coming from. Now, with the Weird Al video, with the Amish man talking to another Amish person, explaining Amishness to another Amish person, right? And we all know Weird Al Yankovic is not Amish, right? If he was Amish, he would not be making parody rap videos. The Amish will never see his parody rap video. He's a Jewish guy from Canada. So, if we've got an Amish man explaining to an Amish woman, one insider explaining to another insider, what does this suggest about their relationship to the outside community, to people outside of their own subculture? Yeah, they don't care if people outside understand, right? It's a closed circle. Now, we can probably see this reinforced if we look at other interactions with outsiders in the video. Right? Who are the only outsiders we see in the Weird Al video? What sort of people are they?
The visitors.
Yeah, tourists, right? And how are the tourists represented? Okay, confused and bored, right? They're kind of assholes, right?
Kind of ignorant.
Yeah, they're ignorant. And the Weird Al Amish guy is constantly representing himself as better than they are, right? I'm more humble than you, right? I'll be laughing my head off when you're burning in hell, right? So this is a world into which outsiders are not invited in, right? Outsiders are feared, shunned, mocked. So how does this then add up to a comment on the nature of these two different communities? What essential difference, right? We've already talked about there is a basic similarity here, right? That the gangsta subculture and the Amish are both in groups that are poorly understood by people outside of them, right? But what key difference between these two groups then is this pointing out? If the guy in the gangster subculture wants to be understood and the guy in the Amish subculture doesn't, let me ask you this. Which life involves more of a conscious choice on your part?
Coolio lifestyle?
Why would you say Coolio's?
I guess if he lives a gangster, is it like a gangster lifestyle? Because I wasn't
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But yeah, if he lives a gangster lifestyle, then he, I guess he has to make like better choices or be more cautious of what he's doing, being that he lives I guess a different lifestyle from others who I guess who at least can just live life without worry. I guess not worry, but live life without people looking at them like a certain way, because if we see a gangster, then I guess we're like scared or something.
Okay, well, yeah, and I think he's trying to,
Yeah, so
on the
that-
one hand, calm some of that,
Yeah.
both calm and reinforce some of that fear, right? It's like, I'm a real person, but there are reasons why you find me frightening, right?
Yeah.
But if we think about the environment where the video takes place in, it's a school, yeah? Aaron, you thought, not unreasonably, that it reminded you more of a prison. Right, so it's in the whole video takes place in public space, a public place. And most of the people we see in it are teenagers. So is Coolio in the video arguing that the gangsta lifestyle is a product of conscious choice or a product of your environment?
Product of your environment.
Yeah. It's really it's the environment that you grow. It's not something you chose. It's something that you grow up in. Right. I think we see that reinforced with the child who comes in and takes off the sunglasses, right? And is sort of looking Coolio directly in the eyes. That this is something sort of generational that continues as a result of environmental factors, right? Social factors. So part of what he's trying to explain is like, I'm not necessarily like this because I want to be. Now, when we think about the Amish, how is the relationship between the Amish and the modern world different from that and the urban gangster, at least as Coolio represents it? Coolio represents the urban gangster as being shaped by modern social and economic forces, right? What about the Amish? What do the Amish say to modernity?
What is an Amish?
How many of you do not know what the Amish are? That was actually something I did not expect. Okay, there are a couple of you, right? Okay, so the Amish are a very strict conservative religious sect. They dress entirely in black. They do not use modern technology. Right? They don't drive cars. They won't have phones in their houses, but they actually will pay as a group to have a phone out in the cornfield for the community to use. There are certain accommodations they make with the modern world, but by and large, their religion is based on a rejection of technology and a rejection of the modern world. So the gangster is shaped by the modern world. The Amish person rejects it. The Amish person makes a conscious choice to push it out, to keep it away. So I think the essential difference that's spelled out here is that those who are shaped by social and economic forces, shaped by the modern world, want other people living in that world to get them. People who have made a conscious choice to close themselves off from that world don't care if other people get them. And as a result, will stick with their in-group. Now, this is actually, believe it or not, relevant to the Toni Morrison story that we're talking about today. So I just want to get your impressions of it. What did you think of this story? How'd this go for you?
It was kind of confused.
Okay, what confused did you want?
I mean, it was using my content, but how the music. At some point, she couldn't tell like who was talking, like which girl was talking.
Okay, so you sometimes found the dialogue parts confusing. Like, it was hard. Yeah, and I think that's confusing on purpose. I think she actually does want you to sometimes mix these two up a little bit.
Yeah, it was really hard to tell the difference between who was black and white.
Okay.
I actually never found it out. I even looked it up, and they didn't say. They said it was still unclear, But I tried to look for context clues and stuff, just trying to help. But each time I would think that one person was black and the other one was white, it would get switched on me just based on what I know already.
Yeah, and Morrison is doing that deliberately. right? And I think, this is one thing we can say about sort of the implied authorial voice here. Remember this idea, the implied author, right? The values that run through the whole text, right? If race is not the important differentiating factor between these two women, what is? We know that, pardon?
I would say the outcome after they left the shelter, the different lifestyle,
Okay.
lifestyle they had after they left the shelter.
Okay. And how are their lives different after they leave St. Bonnie's, after they leave the shelter?
It seemed like Roberta had more like she had money.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a better lifestyle outside of the shelter than I didn't even pronounce the other girl's name.
Twila.
They took two very different paths.
Yeah. And we can actually probably see evidence of different paths that they're already on when they're in the shelter. We'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, if they take these sort of like, so if the primary difference between the two is Roberta is richer, right? Then what is the implied authorial voice saying is really the important differentiating factor between the two of them? Yeah, money, class, right? What's really important here, more so than race, right? Economics and social class. So there is a discourse of race that runs through this, but it's largely submerged under this economic discourse. So what can we tell? Let's just sort of look at each of these two girls and the way that they're characterized, these two women and the way they're characterized. What would you say, what can we say about Twila? What do we know about Twila?
Mom's a dancer.
Okay, or at least her mom never stops dancing, right? Which could perhaps just be a euphemism for something else, right? Right, dancing mother.
Twila herself doesn't make very good grades. Neither one of them do.
Okay, yeah, they both get lousy grades. We know that at least when she gets to the shelter, Roberta can't even read, right?
And her mom is always sick.
Yeah, Roberta's mother is sick. But let's stick with Twila for a moment, since she is our perspective character, right? She's the narrative voice. What else can we say about Twila? Pardon? She gets a job as a waitress, right? Yeah, as an adult. Yeah, keep going.
She's more humble and more like thankful for the things that she had. Like when they was in the shelter,
Mm-hmm.
Roberta never really ate food even when her mother brought stuff.
Yeah.
And Twila was always thankful for it.
Yeah, Twila is certainly not picky about the food she's given, right? And we can see some evidence of perhaps why this is when her mother comes to visit, right? Didn't bring anything for them to eat. They have to make a lunch out of a bunch of mashed up jelly beans. So, certainly we see that in general she's perhaps less picky. What else do we see about Twila? What else can we say about Twila as we look at this character develop through the narrative?
She doesn't really care about the big events. Like she don't even know the upset of the white black at that time.
Okay, yeah, and I think that is actually one of the clues as to which character is white and which character is black. Right? When they meet up as adults, right? And Roberta talks about, oh, you know how things were back then, black and white. And Twila says, well, no, I don't know how things were back then, right? I always thought white and black people got along just great. Who's more likely to say something like that, a white person or a black person?
The white person.
The white person, yeah. Twila is the white girl.
What? I thought Twila was black. Why she was describing Roberta with blue eyes and stuff and all that?
Does she?
Blue eyes she said she had big blue eyes or something.
She did.
I think she may have been talking about like the eyeliner or something, her makeup or something. I don't
okay,
know.
so I probably missed
Yeah. Roberta is never described as having blue eyes.
Oh, okay.
In fact, neither girl is ever really described in much physical detail,
That's
right?
what was hard for me. They only described the people that they hung out with, like when Roberta came to the cafe or whatever. They gave more detail on the guys than they did Roberta.
Yeah. We're told what she's wearing, what her hair looks like, but we're not really told much about what she looks like. Yeah, Jawan.
I kind of figured out that Twila was the black one. Roberta told her that after Maggie failed, that Twila kicked her. She kept saying like you kicked the black woman.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me the idea that Twila was the white one.
Right, because she said, you're a bigot, you kicked a black woman, right? That's another clue. The Twila is the white girl, right? Now, the issue of Maggie is a sort of, it's really important what's going on. Who or what Maggie was and what she represents is a side thing that we'll sort of put over here for now. But what else can we say about Twila? For example, like when she meets Roberta in the diner, when they're young adults, and Roberta's on her way out to California, what does Twila not know? Yeah, she has no idea who the hell Jimi Hendrix is, right? No idea who the hell. So clearly someone who is not following pop culture, right? She's sort of culturally out of step, right? A kind of uncool person. What about Roberta? What can we say about Roberta?
She lives the fancy life.
Okay, yeah, at least as an adult, right? She's rich. And does she actually seem to be richer than Twila when they're little girls as well?
Yeah, in their mother's sense. Like, it never said what she even was, but when she came to the chapel and everything, it was like dressed for the occasion and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's dressed up. Does her mother look particularly warm or loving? I mean, a very severe, very big woman, gigantic cross on her chest, carrying big, and they just sit and she reads the Bible to this daughter she hasn't seen in a long time while the little girl sips on milk, right? So it doesn't seem like a scene that's like really loaded with warmth, right? There's no hugging, there's no playing together. It seems very kind of severe, serious. But what does Roberta's mother bring that Twila's mother doesn't? Yeah. She brings fried chicken and chocolate grams, right? So, at the very least, Roberta is materially better off. Than Twila is. What else can we say about Roberta? What else do we see about Roberta throughout the narrative?
The first time they meet in the cafe, she's kind of like, what you call it, like
shady.
Yeah, in a very broad sense, very fake to her. I thought the first time they met, they'd be like even more excited to see each other, but it like.
And this seems to be what Twila thinks as well, right?
Yeah.
Hey, good to see you, right? She hurries to get her receipts counted up. She hurries to get off her shifts. It's like, here's this, friend from childhood that I haven't seen forever, right? This person with whom I had this 4 months shared experience, right? The only other person in the world who knows what this was like. And then she comes over to the table and gets snubbed. So Roberta, does this sort of behavior continue with Roberta? Does she remain a little bit more snobbish and aloof?
It's back and forth. That's what I noticed. Like when they saw each other in the grocery store and everything, she was the one. It kind of surprised Twila. I think she said when she came up to her and was doing what Twila did the last time.
Yeah, but do all of you understand what was going on with the protests? towards the end of the story.
Was they protesting integrating schools or something?
Yeah, they're not actually protesting racially integrated schools. That would have been something that had already happened,
Yeah.
right? Particularly like in, this is in New York State, right? So what they are protesting here, what protesting for or against, is economically integrated schools, right? One of the interesting vagaries of the American public school system is that because we fund schools primarily through local property taxes, if you live in a neighborhood where property taxes are low or property values are low, schools tend to be under-resourced. Right? The best public schools in the United States tend to be consistently in the richest neighborhoods, because those are the schools that have them, they have the most money. They can hire and retain the best teachers. They have, plenty for materials and for classroom technology, whereas schools in poorer areas tend to lag behind because they don't have those resources. So what some planners attempted to do in the 1970s was integrate economically some of these school districts. So they would bus kids from poorer districts into the richer districts. Now, this often prompted protests, many of which were not just economically but also racially charged, particularly in South Boston. The Irish American Southies in Boston did not want African American children from other neighborhoods coming into their schools. But yeah, the biggest protests were largely touched off by people in the rich districts who didn't want students from poor districts coming in to those schools. So that's what's going on here. And these women are on different sides of this issue, right? Roberta is protesting the busing, right? She doesn't want kids like Twila's son from the wrong side of the tracks going to school with her children. She doesn't want them coming into that school. So she is protesting against the busing. Twila is protesting in favor of busing. But does she even realize that she's protesting in favor of busing? Is that the thing that actually matters to her?
No,
She just wanted to
want
get
to.
back
Yeah.
Yeah. What she's really protesting is Roberta and the way Roberta snubs her. And the way she sees Roberta sort of by proxy then snubbing her kid, right? It's like, oh, okay, so you don't, it's fine to sit down in the gourmet grocery store with me, right? And have a coffee, but you don't want my son going to school with your son.
And another reason I thought Twila was black, because wasn't she the one whose car was getting shoved back and forth and stuff like during the protest? I mean, I just assumed that they wouldn't do a white person like that. I mean, not like back in that
I
time.
thought the same thing. But,
And plus like the officers, from what we've been taught, is like officers, they didn't really help out African Americans like that. But the officers stopped the pushing of the car and stuff. So
Yeah, the officers actually do come and intervene.
Yeah, I kind of assumed like, okay, she must be the white one. I mean,
Well, yeah, and I think, like I said, the story is actually meant to confuse you in this way, right? It's meant to represent both characters in ways that defy conventional stereotypes and that make it difficult to pigeonhole their attitudes and their opinions solely based on race, right? So the important prism here really is the prism of social class. The fact that Twila is working class and that Roberta is relatively wealthy is much more important for understanding their characters than race would be. Not that race isn't an issue in the story, it is. But, like we said, it's a submerged issue.
I don't even think, did they ever even say, I don't think Roberta had a job, her husband was just the rich IBMer, right?
Yeah, her husband does something with computers that she says she doesn't understand, right? Yeah, he's one of the, in the 70s, IBM Computers was really, really big in the New York City suburbs. And so he would be like they're not just rich people, they're also what would sort of be called, do you know what the term nouveau riche means? Anybody ever heard that before? Okay, nouveau riche, you translate it from French, it essentially means new rich. Right, so you talk about people who are nouveau riche, you're talking about people who have not been rich for generations and generations, right? You're talking about people who have newly acquired their money. And so the way these people are sort of described coming in, buying up these fancy old mansions in Newburgh that were falling apart, right? And they're building fancy new malls and fancy new gourmet shopping centers and things like that to accommodate the tastes of, right, these new money people who are changing the fabric of the town. In fact, these are often the people you hear talked about. Like, how many of you are familiar, this is actually an issue in the story, with the term gentrification? Anybody ever heard this word before?
I heard it.
Okay, what is gentrification?
Like dressing up or fancying something.
Well, it's not like sort of dressing up or fancying just anything. Basically, it's dressing up or fancying a neighborhood, right? So you have a neighborhood that's, traditionally poor or working class. Usually the way it works, artists and musicians see, hey, cheap rents, cheap studio space. I can move in here and have space to work and not have to pay a lot of money for it. Score. Wimbrick.
So like, kind of like in Brooklyn right now. I mean, like.
Yeah, I was actually going to reference that in just a second. Yeah, parts of Brooklyn, most of New York City really has gone through this in recent years. And then, so the artists move in, and then the neighborhood becomes cool, right? And so people follow the artists and musicians, right? Hipsters start hanging out in the neighborhood, and then the neighborhood acquires a sort of cachet. Like, as more people want to move in, it gets more expensive to live there. And so richer and richer people start moving in. And eventually the entire fabric of the neighborhood is changed, right? The old neighborhood, what it used to be, is gone. I actually sort of saw this happening firsthand when I lived in New York. I lived in East Harlem in the early 2000s. And I remember when I moved in, my friends and I were unloading the stuff from the moving van, and this woman walked by us with her kids. She's Dominican. Most of the neighborhood was Dominican. And she turns and she looks at us with a hostility that I really didn't understand at the moment, right? She just bored daggers right into us. Because, I just say, hey, I am an indifferently employed recent college graduate. I got a cheap apartment. Yay. What she sees is a bunch of shaggy-haired kids in leather jackets unloading boxes of books and musical equipment. For her, it's like, right, oh shit, this is how it starts. Right, I'm going to be priced out of my home in a couple of months. So this is actually one of the concerns that is referenced in the story. Right, Twila and her old Newburghian family that she's married into, people who have been there for generations, who still call the streets and various stores by names that no longer exist, are being pushed out by Roberta and these nouveau riche. Right, the town is being gentrified. So how does this all come back to their experiences at the school, right? Why is none of this an issue for them when they're at this shelter?
They can't witness what's going on.
Well, when they're at the shelter, why do they band together?
They said they have something in common.
Yeah, they actually have lots of things in common, right? We already mentioned one, right? They're both terrible students, right? They both get shitty grades. Right, they both get Fs in just about everything, including gym. What else do they have in common at the school?
They both get picked on by the guardrail.
Okay, yeah, they're picked on by the older girls. Yep.
So they kind of form an alliance through that.
I think they don't get picked on because of why they think they get picked on. They thought they got picked on because they weren't actually orphans.
Yeah.
I think they actually got picked on because it was a white girl playing with a black girl. I believe that's
Okay.
true.
That could, yeah, that could have something to do with it, but at the very least, that is, yeah, that's something you really kind of have to dig out of it, right? And you kind of have to dig out what happened at St. Bonnie's as well. Like, it's not as clear cut as Twila represents it at the beginning, right? But that does actually point to another similarity here, though, right? One of the things that makes them band together is that they're about the only two girls in the place who aren't real orphans. Right? Who have living parents, who just for whatever reason can't or don't take care of them. So at the school, these things they have in common become more important than the things that would otherwise divide them, right? We can see the beginning of what might be racial strife when they first meet. Now, if you look at the first page of the story, for example, my mother danced all night and Roberta's was sick. That's why we were taken to St. Bonnie's. People want to put their arms around you when you tell them you're in a shelter, but it really wasn't bad. No big long room with 100 beds like Bellevue. There were 4 to a room, and when Roberta and me came, there was a shortage of state kids, so we were the only ones assigned to 406 and could go from bed to bed if we wanted to. And we wanted to, too. We changed beds every night for the whole 4 months we were there. We never picked out one as our own permanent bed. It didn't start out that way. The minute I walked in and the big bozo introduced us, I got sick to my stomach. It was one thing to be taken out of your own bed early in the morning. It was something else to be stuck in a strange place with a girl from a whole other race. And Mary, that's my mother, she was right. Every now and then she would stop dancing long enough to tell me something important, and one of the things she said was that they never washed their hair and they smelled funny. Roberta sure did. Smell funny, I mean. So when the big bozo, nobody ever called her Mrs. Itkin, just like nobody ever said St. Bonaventure. When she said, Twila, this is Roberta, Roberta, this is Twila, make each other welcome, I said, my mother wouldn't like you putting me in here. Good, said Bozo. Maybe then she'll come and take you home. How's that for mean? If Roberta had laughed, I would have killed her, but she didn't. She just walked over to the window and stood with her back to us. So that first response, right, that Roberta doesn't make fun of her make a crack, even after she has said something racially insensitive, begins to forge a bond of commonality between the two of them, right? Now, is it possible that Twila doesn't remember things quite as they were? What suggestions do we have that Twila's memories of St. Bonaventure are perhaps not entirely accurate?
Someone mentioned someone falling or something. And,
yeah, there's the thing about Maggie.
yeah,
Who's Maggie?
that's like the lunch lady. Yeah.
Yeah, the kitchen worker.
She's older, way older, like when they're just kids.
Yep, she's old, at least old to them, right? What else is unusual about Maggie? What else is significant about Maggie?
She wears a hat. That kid.
Yeah, she has that stupid kid's hat, as she said.
She's supposedly blind and mute. I mean, deaf.
Yeah, she's deaf and mute. She can neither hear nor speak. And she was a state kid at St. Bonnie's as well, right? She's been at this place forever. Anything else noteworthy in Maggie's physical description?
She was bowling.
Yeah, the legs like parentheses, right?
She wobbled. She walked.
It wobbles when she walks because of these.
Oh.
And if you think about it, like, what's that?
She fat.
It doesn't really say.
I thought she
You just say that she's short.
Yeah, she's very short, like a kid, right? What color is she?
They just say dark skin. They don't ever even.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking more of almost like Hispanic.
They say sandy colored, right? Yeah. So she's also racially ambiguous. Right? You can't tell just by looking at her what race she belongs to. And the fact that she's deaf and mute and kind of racially ambiguous allows the girls to then kind of read ideas onto Maggie, right? She can't talk back. She can't fight back. And they can project things onto her, right? The idea of what are parentheses? What do parentheses do in a sentence?
Explain something that's like that you would like. You could leave it out, but it's just an extra explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Is your
It's just
favorite?
eyebrows.
Pardon?
It's just eyebrows.
Go ahead.
Not sensitive. Sorry.
Does it help give clarity on something?
Yeah, like usually when you see parentheses in a sentence, right? It's a sort of side note that explains something to you. Yeah. But because Maggie's legs are like parentheses, right? Essentially, what do these parentheses actually enclose?
She was abnormal.
Well, physically, yeah, she's got bow legs, right? But is there anything between the parentheses here?
Oh. Well, is it?
No. Just not going quite that far up, right? We're just talking about what's enclosed, like, this is actually not a sexual reference. It is a reference, though, to the fact that because Maggie is deaf and mute, right, she can't talk, she can't express herself. So what's inside the parentheses here is a blank. And because they can't tell if Maggie is black or white, right? This is part of the basis of Twila and Roberta's argument over her. What can they do to her? What can they do with the idea of Maggie?
They just say what they want. They fill in their own information.
Yeah, they fill in those parentheses themselves. They fill in that blank themselves. Maggie was an old black lady and you kicked her. Maggie wasn't black and I didn't kick her. Right, so how does the narrative of Maggie's fall in the orchard develop? How's it described at first?
Is that they watch her from the window, or no? Maybe they were in the actual orchard, but that the gargoyles fell, or she fell, and then they made fun of her.
Yeah.
And then they started saying that the gargoyles were kicking her and pushed her down.
So in Twila's original memory, right? Whose fault is it that Maggie falls?
The gargoyles?
Well,
Or herself?
they don't actually push her, right?
Yeah.
At least in Twila's original memory, it's no one's fault. Maggie just falls, right? And the bigger girls make fun of her, and Twila and Roberta don't do anything to help, right? Maggie fell down there once, the kitchen woman with legs like parentheses, and the big girls laughed at her. We should have helped her up, I know, but we were scared of those girls with lipstick and eyebrow pencil. Maggie couldn't talk. So this is first iteration of the Maggie's fall narrative, right? She just fell, the girls made fun of her, we should have helped her up, but we didn't. Right, so there's an indication of some guilt there, but it's not an excessively personalized guilt, right? Then how does the narrative change? The next time this comes up, what happens?
Does Roberta say, you remember when you kicked Maggie or something? And,
well, the narrative changes, again, even before that, right?
oh, yeah.
If we look, when they're talking in the coffee shop, right? I don't remember a hell of a lot from those days, but Lord St. Bonnie's is as clear as daylight. Remember Maggie, the day she fell down and those gargoyles laughed at her? Roberta looked up from her salad and stared at me. Maggie didn't fall, she said. Yes, she did, you remember. No, Twila. They knocked her down. Those girls pushed her down and tore her clothes in the orchard. That's not what happened. Sure it is. In the orchard, remember how scared we were? Wait a minute, I don't remember any of that. And Bozo was fired. You're crazy. She was there when I left. You left before me. I went back. You weren't there when they fired Bozo. So, in the second version of this, right, Maggie is pushed by the bigger girls, by the gargoyles, as they call them. And Roberta and Twila run away scared, right? So this is a much more threatening scenario than what Twila remembers. So, two important things here, right? One, Twila's memory is faulty. Two, perhaps because of the difference in class background between her and Roberta, she remembers St. Bonnie's, right, as a place where, okay, maybe it wasn't great, but I got fed a lot there, right? Someone actually looked after me and took care of me, unlike my dancing mother. For Roberta, this place is a lot more threatening and terrifying. These older girls are scary and mean. They push people and tear their clothes. And the staff is incompetent. Right, so it's not even so much a case maybe of faulty memory as in just not having, like, two different people from different backgrounds having a different experience of the same event at the same place. And then Maggie becomes a weapon, right? Right, version 3, Twila pushed Maggie and kicked her. You're the one who kicked that poor old black lady in the orchard. Right, when they're fighting over the busing. And then how is the Maggie story resolved? What's the final version of what happened?
What happened to Maggie?
Yeah, well, yeah, shit, what happened to Maggie, right? Roberta admits that she can't remember clearly. She thinks that, yeah, it was the bigger girls that pushed Maggie. That's what happened. But in the end, they can't resolve what happened to Maggie. Now, what does Roberta claim Maggie is a stand-in for? What ideas does she say she projects onto Maggie. If we look near the end of the story here, right? She's trying to make it up to Twila here at the end, right? They run into each other at the diner. Listen to me, I really did think she was black. I didn't make that up. I really thought so. But now I can't be sure. I just remember her as old, so old. And because she couldn't talk, well, you know, I thought she was crazy. She'd been brought up in an institution like my mother was, and like I thought I would be too. And you were right. We didn't kick her. It was the Gargoyles, only then. But, well, I wanted to. I really wanted them to hurt her. I said we did it too, you and me, but that's not true. And I don't want you to carry that around. It was just that I wanted to do it so bad that day. Wanting to do is doing it.
That part was crazy. And it's like,
Well, yeah, like, what does she read? What does Roberta read this deaf woman as? A woman who neither hears nor speaks.
like useless almost.
But why would that make her so angry? What's the other theme we haven't really quite talked about that runs through their arguments? Mothers, yeah. Every time they see each other. How's your mother?
Does the dancing and sick mothers mean something more than what you said?
Probably. I would say, yeah, the dancing mother, I mean, what impression do we get of Twila's mother when she does show up? She seemed like the sort of person who should be responsible for a child. Right? Someone who can't even take care of herself, right? She forgets to bring any food. She's rude to other people. She seems to get, like, the dancing thing seems to, like, this is someone who only cares about a good time. And she never stopped caring about simply having a good time, right? Whatever dancing might be a euphemism for, essentially Twila's mother is represented as a party girl. Now, Roberta's sick mother, there may be an actual physical illness there, right? But there might be something psychological as well, right? We do recall, we talked a moment ago, that we didn't see a lot of warmth in the relationship, right? It's a very sort of severe, formal kind of relationship. Did your mother ever stop dancing? No. Did your mother ever get better? No. And Roberta is reading Maggie as a stand-in for these distant, absent mothers, right? Roberta reads Maggie as black because she's black, and she sees Maggie as a stand-in for her mother who didn't hear her or speak to her, right? The mother she didn't feel she got enough care from. Twila reads Maggie as white for the same reasons. For both girls, Maggie and what happens to Maggie become a representation of what they wished they could have done to their mothers. Right? Their sort of anger at Maggie, right? Maggie is a kind of scapegoat for the anger they can't take out on their mothers. But there's another dimension to Maggie as well that neither of them quite gets to. So what that Maggie is so small, right? She's short, and she wears that stupid kid's hat. What else is she?
Is she slow?
Pardon?
Is she slow? Or is she mentally?
Well, maybe not. Maybe in the literal sense, yeah. But
Is she a midget? Is that what you're trying to get at?
well, no, I'm not trying actually to get at something literal here about Maggie, right? I'm trying to get at something that she might represent for these two girls, right? So she's short, she wears this stupid kid's hat, and she's lived at St. Bonnie's basically all her life.
Seems like a punching bag. She's kind of like, it's almost like a cycle, you know, they got judged by the Gargoyles, and then Maggie that was somebody that they could just throw
Yeah.
their words at, stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. They can throw their words, they can throw their anger at her,
Yeah.
and she can't respond. But she's also like them,
Yeah.
right? She is a victim of abuse who's powerless to fight back. Right? She can't even say anything in her own defense. Right? They talk about, well, if somebody tries to kill her, can she scream? Right? What happens if she cries? Right? Tears come out but no sound. So Maggie can't express any pain that she feels. Just as these two can't feel that they express any pain that they feel and actually be heard. Because their mothers aren't there to hear them. And no one at St. Bonnie's cares. They're just a couple of little state kids. So Maggie becomes another thing that the two, even though they can't agree on what happened to her, she is also a thing that the two of them have in common, right? They both read both their own situations and the lives of their mothers onto Maggie. All right, that's about all I have for you. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
For the homework assignment, this is for,
Yeah, don't worry about doing assignment 4, just because you can't, because we don't have the thing in the library. So, yay. Hooray for budget cuts.